This is a podcast on exam revision strategies for business school students at the University of Buckingham. The aim of this podcast is to give you some ideas for new things that you can try during your revision period rather than just using the same tactics that you've always used. The reason why I'm recommending that you make some changes is that we know that many of the revision methods students traditionally use aren't actually developing their subject understanding in a way that's useful for the kind of testing we do in university exams. So examples would include lots of repeat reading, whether it's even of your own notes or of lecture slides, and a regular occurrence which is bulk last minute cramming of information. So the reason why these are less effective is because in an exam environment, most of the time what we're testing is not just your knowledge, what you remember from what you've learnt during the term, but your understanding of the concepts that we've taught you during the term or during the module. The difference between them is the difference between just being familiar with specific pieces of information. So if somebody says to you, "What do you know about this subject?" you can tell them that specific information. That would count as knowledge, versus understanding, which would be to be faced with an unseen question or problem in an exam environment, to be able to select good information from your knowledge bank to apply to that question and to do it in a way that demonstrates a good level of understanding. So the example of that I've got here is the difference between being able to name the 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, put them in order, and just explain what each one means. That would count as knowledge, whereas understanding would be to be able to decide in an exam setting whether this is a good model or theory to be discussing in relation to the question you have in front of you, or perhaps being able to apply that knowledge to your understanding of work environments and what managers have to do, how useful or not useful it would be for them. The kind of knowledge that you're showing in if you're in that grey triangle area is really quite simple, and in actual fact it's something that a child could do if they had a good memory and if you ask them the right question. Whereas the understanding that you're demonstrating is much more based on having an understanding of how the world works, how business works, how professional environments work, and the ways that theory and models apply to those contexts. I'm recommending that for a revision strategy, you use a 3-stage strategy that is called need, test, and check. So the first stage of the strategy is actually probably quite similar to what you're doing now. You're just being quite strategic and clever in the way you approach your exams. You're not just sort of diving headfirst into a pile of paper. You're finding out what's going to be covered by emailing lecturers if necessary, but definitely turning up to revision lectures, definitely checking out previous year's exam papers and asking the right questions. Then what I'm recommending you do next is, instead of going straight to your lecture slides or your books or even your notes, that you spend 10 or 15 minutes trying to remember everything that you've learnt previously, even if it's for a module that you studied last term. Anything that you can remember from a long time away is knowledge that you have some sort of secure grasp on. So it's worthwhile finding out what you know already, and then at that point going back to your notes, checking what did I remember, what did I forget, what do I need to focus on next. And you can do that 3-stage revision strategy for all of your modules. Using this strategy, you can set yourself a couple of goals that are really going to be focused on, as I said, getting that understanding of the concepts you're learning, not just remembering the knowledge that you've learnt. These are the goals that you are revising to retrieve and you are revising to apply. So I'll run through those with you now. When you revise to retrieve, you are basically making sure that you're not just filling your mind full of facts and information and data, that you are actually making it your focus to constantly test yourself prior to the exam for how much of that information you have access to, how are you getting it from your long-term memory into your short-term memory when you need it. So the test and check system that I mentioned for the 3-stage revision strategy is really focused on that. This idea that you are testing what you know currently, checking to see what you got right, what you need to do in future, and then make your revision focused around those things that you need to, that are now your new priority. You don't forget the stuff that you've remembered previously, but you make sure you orient your attention to the things that you need more work and more assistance with. And it's also recommended that when you do this, you do a few additional things, that you mix it up, so you're not just learning one subject over and over again or one formula over and over again. Mix up your modules, mix up your formulas. You're adding a degree of difficulty that's going to help you with the process of ensuring that you're remaining focused, that you're remaining interested, and that you are not just giving yourself an illusion of knowing things and remembering things that can sometimes happen if you just read the same material over and over again. And lastly, it's also recommended that you try and speak what you know, like your new knowledge. So at the end of a day of revision, perhaps you might like to get up at the dinner table or wherever you are and just tell people what you've revised that day, because there is a rule that if you can explain something clearly to an amateur and they can understand it, then you can be pretty confident that you understand it yourself, and the reverse as well. Okay, one of the important things when you're revising to retrieve is to leave space for forgetting. So don't just revise something 1 hour and test yourself the next hour. You need to at least leave a day, if possible more than a day, because there is a natural forgetting cycle that your mind goes through, and there's also a natural information consolidation cycle that your brain goes through, particularly overnight when you're sleeping, but also when you're exercising. So if you leave the space to forget things, then you're basically testing yourself in a much more realistic way than you would be if you just revised immediately afterwards. Revising to apply is about being able to tell the difference between sort of abstract knowledge or separate pieces of knowledge and the actual way that that knowledge is useful in different situations or for different problems. And the example I can use here is the difference between having a makeup kit with all those different pieces of paraphernalia and being able to make yourself up like a glam rock icon from the 1970s. It's being able to apply information is incredibly important, because that's one of the things we will be testing you for repeatedly. And also not just knowing one way that you can apply that information, but being aware of other ways that you can apply that information. So how do you revise to apply? Well, it's important that you are asking questions. One question is, why is this important? So to know why you're learning something is really quite important. And also, where does it apply? So what makes this useful information, and where is it useful? Who is using it? Those are good questions to make sure that you're getting that contextual understanding. And also then being able to tell the difference and link together the theory with the practice. So many times in exams you're asked to discuss something and give an example. So often that's linking a theory to practice or a model to practice. And then another way that you can ensure that you're revising to apply is to be able to think of things in relationship to each other. So you may have learnt on a particular module several different models or processes. If you learn them just as separate pieces of information and don't think about how they relate to each other, what their different strengths and weaknesses are, then you haven't really got useful information for the kind of test you're going to be facing in an exam. So alternative theories, compare and contrast, alternative models, compare and contrast. Now, if anyone tells you that it's easy to change your habits, well then they just don't know what they're talking about. It is difficult to change your habits. However, what I'm recommending here is something that maybe you're not going to be that upset about, and that's that you read less in the run up to your exams, and that you test yourself more. There is a danger in using reading and rereading as an exam revision strategy. First of all, it's not particularly efficient, and secondly, it can lead to what's known as delusions of knowledge. So merely being familiar with the way that something's written on a lecture slide or on a piece of paper can be mistaken for having an in-depth knowledge. What else can you do? There are some other things you can do at this point. You can put yourself under the right sort of pressure. So when you bear in mind that going into exams it is going to be pressured, make sure that you are using some points of pressure as part of your revision. Time yourself, test yourself, but also remember to refresh your brain regularly. 25 or 30 minute intervals, come up for air, walk away, make yourself a cup of tea. It's not just a matter of just trying to stuff everything into your mind and forgetting that it has its limits and that you have your limits. Okay, so thank you for your attention. Good luck in your exams. This is one of 3 videos. There's also one on memory techniques for exams and stress management techniques.